first Russian Revolution began in 1905. Citizens and recently freed slaves had grown to be unhappy after years under the oppressive hand of Tsar Nicholas II. In January, 200,000 Russians marched to Nicholas's Winter Palace to deliver a petition demanding improved working conditions and a democratically elected assembly. Their attempt was met with violence, and hundreds died. The shooting fueled more demonstrations and strikes. Nicholas eventually agreed to give up some power and create the Duma, the democratically elected assembly, but it was too little, too late to pacify the workers, and dissent increased. In December, the Tsar's army crushed an uprising in Moscow, arresting many. In 1914, Germany declared war and easily defeated the Russian army due to a lack of basic military supplies, training, and leadership, leading to a failing economy and erosion of trust in the Tsar. Citizens and soldiers alike became rebellious. In March of 1917, riots broke out in Petrograd, formerly St. Petersburg, over food and coal shortages, and troops initially sent to pacify the crowd joined the demonstration. Later that month, Nicholas was forced by government officials to abdicate. The Duma, supported by businessmen and the military, set up a provisional government. Meanwhile, Petrograd Soviet, which had support among industrial workers and rank-and-file soldiers, gained popularity. Lenin, founder of the Bolshevik Party, returned from Switzerland to become a leader of the Petrograd Soviet along with Trotsky, and called for an overthrow of the provisional government. The provisional government, now led by lawyer Alexander Kerensky, ordered Lenin and other Bolshevik leaders to be arrested. In November, the Bolsheviks took over all key positions in Petrograd in the Winter Palace, which was serving as the headquarters for the Duma. All over the country, workers' councils and Soviets gained control. In December, Germany and Russia negotiated a ceasefire, though this came with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which meant great land and political losses for Russia. Eventually, the Petrograd Soviet morphed into the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The next 4 years would be a bloody civil war between the Whites, or counter-revolutionaries, and the Red Army led by Trotsky. In 1922, the Red Army, or the Communists, won and the revolution was complete. Their name would officially change to Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, or the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was led by Lenin until his death in 1924, when Stalin seized and maintained power until his own death in 1953. Stalin began his first 5-year plan in 1928, soon after young Shostakovich graduated from conservatory. The 5-year plan required all Soviet artists, musicians, and writers to produce works that glorified the real and imaginary accomplishments of workers and peasants, thereby supporting his socialist goals. From 1929 to 1932, the concept of socialist realism emerged. This art form portrayed not only what is, but also supposedly what will be. Soviet citizens involved in the arts and culture were to portray the idealized future and thus help create it. According to Stalin, the artists, musicians, and writers would become engineers of the human mind. If artists did not conform to these standards, punishments were severe. Several artists were told to have kept bags near their door in anticipation of their arrest. Some even slept near their doors as to not disturb their families when they were taken. Much of Shostakovich's music incorporated Russian folk tunes, which pleased Stalin and other bureaucrats who knew nothing about music, yet still had the power to judge his works acceptable or not. Music during that time also became increasingly militaristic and mechanical, as demonstrated by not only Shostakovich's work, but also of other composers. His music was greatly dramatic and folksy like his 19th century predecessors, but changing times and tastes led to less romanticism and more modernism, though only in small doses for fear of Stalin. In 1932, Shostakovich wrote the opera Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk. A few years later, in 1936, the opera, seen by Stalin himself, was condemned for its formalism, crude eroticism, and musical inaccessibility. Formalism was any music that Stalin did not like or understand. Fearful of its reception, Shostakovich wrote the renowned and successful Fifth Symphony as an apology. In 1960, he wrote what is considered his autobiographical Eighth Quartet. The quick notes of the fourth movement are often said to be the knock of the secret police. Around Around this time, he was forced to join the Communist Party and his health began to decline. In 1969, he wrote his 14th symphony based on poems about death. He died just a few years later, in 1975, of cancer. The 20th century brought little, if any, room at all to explore new styles that were emerging, such as atonality, which was banned during Stalin's reign. To be an artist during this time, you had to give up what it meant to be an artist: your freedom, expression, and exploration.